Should be a very interesting evening. My name is Paul Gazowski. I host this series. This is the Backyard Farming Initiative, which is co-sponsored by the Lee Agricultural Commission and the Lee Public Library. The last time we met, I don't know if we're an omen of any sort, but the last time we met was in January, and it was the night before the blizzard. And since the last time we met, I don't need to tell you this, but I do keep a record at home. We've had 61 inches of snow, and so we are grateful as a group that you came out tonight to in this cold weather. And my understanding is we're on the cusp of breaking the all-time cold record for February in New Hampshire and Concord, so looks like we might break it tonight. Would like to thank a few people before we begin, beginning with Jimmy Brady, and Jimmy's in the back there. Jimmy's a member of the Grange. This is our Grange Hall, Jeremiah Smith Grange Hall. Jimmy got this place warm for us today, and Jimmy plowed for us, so we're all set, and we're really grateful for it. Also, I mentioned our sponsors before. The committee that assembles this series is comprised of largely three folks who are the mainstays. Donna Lee Woods, who is in the back there. She's from the Ag Commission. Chuck Cox, right there, from the Ag Commission. My wife, Annie Gazowski, who's the chair of the Library of Trustees. They put the series together. This is entirely featuring farms in Lee, and the theme is dreams, farming dreams. Although we may stray from that, we'll come back to that at a number of points in time. Eric Sawtell is right there. He's the chair of the Ag Commission. At the end of the evening, we're going to turn it back to him, and we have another special event coming up in the Grange Hall on March 8th, and you might be interested in that. Tonight, we have Steve Handler and Deb Fisher from Mildred's Drumlin farm. And does anybody know what a drumlin is? You want to? Yeah.
It's a pile of gravel up by the glaciers.
Indeed it is. And out on...
there goes my first 2 minutes. That's my first 2 minutes. Just
we
kidding.
haven't talked about this. I'm stealing some of this thunder. So out on Lee Hook Road, which is has to be one of the most scenic farm roads in New Hampshire. It's just a beautiful road, and so cool to have all this happening in Lee is their farm, and they work it together. Also we have Velvet Pastures farm here tonight. Lou Ann Griswold, her husband, along with her husband Jim Griswold, who is not able to be here tonight. He's a member of the Portsmouth Symphony, and because of the snow, they missed a number of rehearsals, so he's rehearsing tonight. What instrument does he play?
A bass trombone.
Bass trombone. I think we're going to hear something a little later on that kind of perhaps resembles that, but perhaps not. Enough of me, okay? And we're going to turn it over to Steve and Deb, and they're going to kind of lead us through the format here is 15 minutes for the presenters to present. Then we open it up to you for questions for 15 minutes, and then we'll go to our second presenter. And about 8 o'clock or so, we'll just open it up to general questions. This is casual, needless to say, so I think a lot of these folks would be comfortable. If you can't hold a question, just kind of interrupt politely, and we'll kind of handle it as we go.
Just shout it out.
Steve Handler.
Thanks, Paul. As he said, Deb and I run Mildred's Drumlin farm. We are on Lee Hook Road at the far end, and if anybody's from out of town doesn't know, that's this road right out here. We're the last place on the right in Lee. Actually, on the Durham town line. There's a little bit of Durham that sticks in there as well. And we are on a drumlin, and a drumlin, to expand on that just a little bit, is it is shoved up by the glaciers. And it's kind of a inverted, you could picture it as an inverted teaspoon. So it's kind of steep at if you flipped it over at the handle end, it would kind of steep up, and then it tapers off, goes down on the side and then tapers off. And if you were to drive down Lee Hook Road and you get to the old Athmore Dairy Farm and look up the hill, it's pretty steep, and it comes up steep on all the sides, and then it just tapers off towards Newmarket. And that's the direction, I'm guessing anyway, that that's the direction that the glacier was traveling, and that's usually how they form. So, and we're lucky enough, we have about, the road pretty much runs down the middle of the Drumlin, and we have half of the Drumlin pretty much for our farmland. And so that's part of our name. The other part is Mildred, and that was my mother, and sort of a homage to her. And that's because she was an old farmer, and it was her property since 1956. And when we decided to become commercial farmers, wanted to use the name Drumlin Farm, she gave it that name. And I Googled Drumlin Farm, and there's one down in Kensington that's certified organic, and there's an educational farm in Massachusetts someplace that's also Drumlin Farm, so I stuck her name on the front of that, and she would like that. So as I said, I grew up, I moved to Lee Hook Road in the big house across from where we are at the age of the summer I turned 4 in 1956, and so I've been on the property quite a while. I built a house, raised a family, and that house was built probably about 40 years ago. And when I was about 18, I started, I don't know, I got the sort of the back to the land hippie bug of some sort, and decided to plow up some of that field, grew some potatoes. Yeah, it was my first farming adventure. Really enjoyed it. It was really futile, but it was really, I had a really good time doing it with a whole bunch of my friends, and we had a pretty good amount of potatoes plowed up, and we went, no market, no nothing, and just planted them. We'll do something with them later. And we wound up selling a couple 100 pounds of maybe 2,000 to a place over in Exeter called, what was owned by Fred Marshland. Somebody might remember who that was. It's across from the Scammons Agway. And he had a sign up there in the front that says organic vegetables, which I always thought was kind of interesting. That was kind of a little pre-organic. It was a different spin on it. But anyway, we get 8 cents a pound for those potatoes. I remember that. And so anyway, so that plot is still part of our farm. I continued, even though I didn't build a house for a while, continued to farm that and raise food for myself and then my family, and as well as my parents. And along the way I became, well, with kids and house and mortgage and all that stuff, even though I wanted to do more farming, I learned the welding trade and metal fabricating trade and did that to make a living, because especially then there really wasn't enough money for me in that small amount of land to be a farmer. So, but that was always something I wanted to do, and sort of serendipity came along, and in 2008, the economic well, I should back up a little bit. We have been a certified tree farm for probably 30 years or so, and very small, but we meet the qualifications. So we did some silviculture and what have you, and managed the forest a bit, and had done a logging project, and maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And we had a timber sale, some timber marked out, and wanted to do a small timber sale. It was very small. And I have a good friend who's a logger, and I tried to get him to do it. He didn't want to do it. No one wanted to do this timber sale because the economy was booming and they just didn't want to do a little job. And so in 2008, the economy went down the drain. My welding business pretty much went down the drain along with it. And my logger buddy that I grew up with just showed up one day and said, "Hey, do you still want those trees cut?" Because they were no longer doing the big jobs that they could set up on for 6 months, and he was looking for work. So I was slow and was kind of pretty well dead in the water in the welding business, and just made the decision, he's going to cut these trees for me, we'll open up a little more land. That was really a timber harvest of nice logs, but we decided to get rid of some old Christmas trees and reclaim some old pasture, which had been the hillside of the Drumlin was pasture when I was a kid. And in fact, Jim Brady's uncle hayed that for years, and but I don't think he liked the hillside too much. It was pretty steep, and when he stopped doing that, the trees came up. And so we got rid of all of those trees. and reclaimed probably 3 acres of the hillside, and the rest of the drumlin that was in old Christmas trees really at that point. And through the timber sale, I was able to come up with enough money to finance and a little welding trade with my logger buddy, have the stumping done, stump the whole hillside, bought seed for the hillside, and get, it was enough money to get going, so we didn't have to take a loan, and have it going that way. So from there to here, so it first became kind of an idea to make a retirement business, but it took on a life of its own. There was no real plan, it just sort of all happened at once, and okay, well, let's plant this and plant that. And the planning came about 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, and we sort of say, well, wow, we got, this is a mess, so we started kind of thinking a little bit more and trying to plan a little bit more, and became a full-time business for me. And although I still do a little bit of welding when I can be talked into it or something for myself. So anyway, so in those years since, we have now a half an acre of vegetables, mixed vegetables and strawberries, and 140 blueberry bushes. They're different ages, but they'll all be mature within a couple of years. A couple hundred feet of fall raspberries, asparagus. We sell some Christmas trees, a few flowers, and last year we decided to have a couple of sheep and a couple of goats, and that was not really, we have that meat for sale, and we eat some of it, and but it was really more to maintain this land that we had opened up on the hillside, and because that's all filled with weeds, it's old pasture. It was reseeded, but it didn't take very well because we had 5 inches of rain shortly thereafter when it was first seeded, so that didn't go so well. And we have a lot of trees behind the house that was filled with invasive species. We had brambles, bittersweet, I don't know, all kinds of stuff out there that we didn't really, autumn olive. And so we put the goats and the sheep. The sheep decided they were goats after a while, so they just browsed all together all the time and pretty much wiped out most of the brambles. And most of that brush we didn't want. We're going to put some more out there this year as well. So that was really kind of it wasn't really the point of going in the meat business, but just to utilize that land. And no, I'm not mowing it, and we're not chasing around after the brush and trying to kill those species. We're going to get a couple more of both the sheep and the goats this year and expand that a little bit, clean out a little more woods with them. And that's worked out quite well. We sell our products at the Lee Farmers Market, the Durham Farmers Market, and through a CSA. Our CSA is, and that's what and maybe Deb enjoys the most, because it's really community. We have people coming to the farm and you get to know them a little bit, and you have more time to spend with them sometimes. It depends on how busy we are, of course. And we like to share what we do. Feel like we're successful. We really enjoy what we're doing, growing the vegetables, and that's a great way for us to share that and foster the community. I don't need to explain too much. I have some handouts over there about it. If anybody's interested, it tells more of the details of it. As part of that community, we do have sort of some add-ons that go with the vegetables. We just do vegetables and the small fruits. Donna Lee in Hickory Nut brings her cheese over. She makes that available. We have a bread club, the Juniper Cottage Bakery, and we're getting eggs this year from Red Cardinal Farm, which is over in Nottingham. So we're able to kind of provide all of that as well for people that want. It's not a part of the CSA per se, but it's available to people who are in it. And we have a cut your own herb garden, which Deb maintains mostly. Culinary herbs, and people who are in the CSA are just welcome anytime, and they do it usually CSA day. They can come anytime and help themselves to whatever they might like for herbs. So, as I said, that my job this is my full-time job now, which is what I always wanted to do. I still do some part-time work welding, metal fabricating. We make a lot of our own stuff, or I make a lot of my own metal. based equipment. I have a broad fork here that I make, and I just coincidentally sell from time to time. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute, if I have a minute. And make a lot of the tillage. I have my own primary tillage equipment, which is an S-time cultivator / chisel plow machine, which basically does not, we do our primary tillage in the spring. We don't turn the soil over like the old-fashioned furrow-making plow. We just slide, there's shovels basically that slide in 8 or 10 inches and just aerate the soil and lift it up a little bit and loosens it. And so that's all something I made from a photograph basically and looking at one up at the Common Ground Fair. So Deb has her own cushion business. She helps me as much as she can, and that's mostly harvest days, so 3 days a week. When we're picking vegetables for the market or for the CSA, she's always there helping me, and picking beans sometimes. So we, just a little bit about how we grow. We use organic, biointensive, and biological methods to grow our fruits and vegetables. And they're all very related, and probably 20 years ago, organic covered all of that, but organic is a little different now, I think. In my opinion anyway, it's a qualitative method of growing, partly because the government took the name organic 20 years ago, maybe, something like that. I'm not sure exactly how long ago, but they now own the name organic, so you can't market your product as organic unless you participate in that USDA or state-run program. So it now has become kind of a measurable thing with allowable inputs. Pesticides and organic farmers, some do use varying amounts of pesticides. They have to be listed for use. Pesticides, fertilizers, virtually anything you put in the soil. Something called manure rule, which is how soon you can, or how much time you have to lag between putting manure on the field and when you can harvest vegetables. Things like that, so are all measurable and certifiable type things. Is really more, in my opinion anyway, what organic is about. We participate in a different program. We are certified naturally grown, which is they call it the grassroots alternative to the national program. We follow the same list of allowable substances and inputs. We follow the same basic procedures, like the buffer zone from conventional farm where they might be spraying, and the manure rule and all of that stuff. We don't have as much paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork in the USDA programs. We have very little paperwork. We have to keep our records and document where our seeds come from and that sort of thing. The most attractive to me is, well, the money is less, and that's attractive. We, let's see, just lost my train of thought, sorry. It's the, we have a peer review inspection process. Instead of having a third party come in, like in New Hampshire, it's the state of New Hampshire, or Maine Organic Farmers have a certification organization as part of their group that goes out and they inspect. We do a peer review. So if I need to find a certified naturally grown farmer to inspect me, and I have to inspect someone else, we're not trading back and forth. If there aren't, and there aren't many in this part of the world, there are many down south. I don't know if that's anti-government or maybe a little bit of that keeps, makes them more popular. I think the money's a little bit more of an issue down there too, maybe. I'm not sure. But anyway, we do a peer inspection. I've had, you can have a master gardener. Like I said, there aren't many CNG farms around. I've had a master gardener. That was Andy Gazowski, actually. Paul came along. That was a few years ago. I've had Joel Miller from Wild Miller Farm. He's USD, was New Hampshire certified organic, and he did it. And last year I was lucky enough to get Eric Seidemann, who is the MOFGA, it's a Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners crop specialist. He came down to do it, and I asked for him specifically because I wanted to pick his brain. And so that's something that really appeals to me about that program, is that, and I think maybe originally the organic program was more like that before it became this bureaucracy. And that way it's a sharing of ideas. You go and it's more about community. So that really appeals to me.
Can you talk about the crops you brought?
Oh, am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit.
This is just real quick about so the biointensive is really a method of growing that, and biological is kind of related to it. It's all about the soil biology and mineralization of the soil and being sure all the good stuff is in there you need and not disturbing the layers of the soil and the critters that are in there that are beneficial. And, but a big part of biointensive is using as much of the land as possible once it's in the proper shape. And so we grow on beds. Our beds are 42 inches on centers. They're not permanent beds. I remake them every year. They're 42 inches on center, which gives us like 26 inches or thereabouts of usable planting space. We don't plant on rows in there. For the most part, we plant in little grids, in triangular shaped grids, with the intention of all the plants eventually touching crown to crown. So they'll tell you plant a row of carrots or say lettuce every 12 or 14 inches. We don't, we plant them 12 inches apart in a triangular shape and we pack it. We'll do the same thing with spinach. They're about 8 inches apart. In a grid, you actually gain about 15% more plants in the length of a bed or in a given space. And we will, and actually it's a good segue into this. When we do, so we transplant most of our crops as much as we can. We transplant, and that if anybody's ever put spinach out and all of a sudden it's cold and damp and you only get spotty or whatever, we don't do that anymore. Spinach is all started in these soil blocks, which I made a few and I'm pass around. It's not quite time to use them yet, but they'll go back in the bag, I guess. But and that's what this is, a soil block maker. And it helps us get away from the use of all the plastic as well.
You want this?
Yeah, we can just hand this around. You can hand this too if you want.
They look like snacks, but they aren't.
Yeah,
so-
they aren't muffins. So we just have this little press. It's compost-based soil mix, compost and peat, and you wet it and you put it in, you mush it into this thing and pack it real hard and squeeze this and it pops out these little soil blocks. And then for spinach, for instance, we'll put 4 seeds or 5 seeds in each one of those. So we'll start, and they'll actually germinate without covering them. But I usually will put a little bit of soil, depends on the seed. And so when they germinate, we actually have 4 spinach plants, ideally 4, usually get 3 or 4, growing out of that same block. So instead of 1 plant down the row every 8 inches or whatever, and the next row 12 inches apart, we've got 4 plants and 8 inches away in every direction, we've got 4 more plants. So we really pack it in big time. And so we get a lot more yield out of it. You get less weeds out of it because the canopy will close. Once the canopy's closed, it shades out a lot of the weeds. So we don't have that issue. So that is planting in a grid like that is a biointensive kind of method. And the other thing about biointensive is this is sort of another part of it. Once we've done our primary tillage in the spring, the soil's been loosened once. If we've harvested an area, we'll just go through this. It's just my version of a broad fork. They're pretty commonly seen around these days in catalogs and stuff. And you can go right down the row and just jab it in there and pull back on it, and it goes down 8 or 10 inches and just lifts the soil, aerates the soil, and we just leave all the rubble from the previous crop there, the roots of the lettuce or whatever it is, and just knock them out of the way and let the worms take care of tilling it in, decomposing it, and plant more crops in there.
At what point of the season do you do that?
With this?
Yeah.
Like I said, we do like a primary tillage with a machine that I made, an implement that I made, that is like it's an S-tine, they're about this long, and it's got a shovel about the size of my hand, and it goes under the surface. So that's what I would do first.
When?
As soon as it's dry enough.
In the spring?
In the spring.
Oh.
Yeah, as soon as it's dry enough. I may do it again in the fall to prep it for a cover crop or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't know if you did it in the fall just to mix it up a little for the upcoming spring or not.
Just depends on what, but yes, probably. If it doesn't have too much rubble, and then we'll put a cover crop on it, yeah?
We'll take some questions at this point in time if you have any, otherwise Steve can keep
Yeah.
going.
Planting them in a triangle, is that a biointensive?
Yes. It's a technique,
So you didn't devise it?
no.
Okay.
No,
Just curious.
somebody out in California.
Other questions?
No?
In terms of how you co-plant, do you co-plant
Any companion?
companion plant?
I don't really.
Okay.
Actually, one thing, well, this is sort of vaguely related. One thing we're starting to do this year, it's kind of along the biological part of farming. We've started looking into pollinator and beneficial insect plantings to attract them on a bigger scale. We had a lot of, anybody's been by and is familiar with us, we had a lot of brush, a lot of bittersweet and brambles and stuff all down the edge of the road between the stone wall and the gardens. And until a couple of years ago, we've taken a lot of that brush out. Last spring, we did a small area and we had it stumped and tilled it up a little bit. We put a beneficials mix, which was mostly various kinds of wildflowers, as well as some annual things like daikon and whatever that would. So you wind up with nectar-producing plants through the entire season until November sometime. There were still little white flowers out there at the end of November, in fact. And it should reseed, the annuals hopefully reseed themselves somewhat, perennials will come back. Those mixes, it looks like they probably only last a couple of years if you're lucky. But that's something we're starting to look into more. I've got quite a bit more space to do with that. I'm going to prepare it a little bit better first, I think. It was kind of a like, hey, let's try this last year. And it did work. I mean, you could walk through there, it was loaded with bees, and you'd find all kinds of little wasps and stuff, which I assume wasps will eat anything, kill anything pretty much, I think. And so we're looking into that, and then we're going to do some, the plan is to do a beetle bank, which is essentially, there are all these predatory ground beetles that need a place to live in the wintertime and breed and whatever. And so you make a little mound and you plant like bunch grasses, native bunch grasses that are invasive, don't just spread, they just come up in a clump like that. And the beetles like that for nesting sites. And they will travel into the garden in the spring and they eat weed seeds as well as certain kinds of insects. In the soil type insects, nematodes, things like that. So we're looking to build one of those and just see how that goes. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, so how long have you been doing like biointensive and soil blocks, that method?
Soil blocks I started fooling with maybe 3 or 4 years ago, like in the middle of the summer to plant some fall lettuce, and I just started fooling with them. And before that it was mostly with the seeder, just rows, seeding rows of stuff and whatever. And they're actually quite simple to use once you get the tricks of it, like so many things. You need the right soil mix and you need to get the right moisture into it so it makes the little block and doesn't fall apart or dry out. You can't let them dry out. And so anyway, so once you get the hang of that, it goes pretty easy. I mean, we just make plywood, little piece of plywood like so with 3 sides on it, and just in the tub where it's mixed, pop them in there, back and forth, and you can fill 84. They'll hold 84, and it takes about 5 minutes to fill it up. And then and actually it's great lettuce. I found it wonderful for lettuce. Most lettuce germinates at like 97% of the, if you look at the seed packet. So we just put just one seed. I mean, I've got 10 just the little packets of seeds have 500 seeds in them. That's a lot for $3.95, that's a lot of lettuce. So just one seed in each, and almost all of them come up, which is great.
You have really a rare thing, a lifelong relationship with the same piece
Yeah,
of
it's my
land.
life's work.
Yeah, and I'm wondering from childhood to adulthood, I guess 2 questions. You can choose to answer whichever one you want. What's your favorite spot on that piece of land? Or how has your relationship to the land evolved from childhood to adulthood?
Well, my favorite spot is just being out in the gardens. And actually, it's all cleared down the hill now, so you can stand there, you can look down in the woods. Last year, we saw turkeys walking by. I saw a coyote come out walking behind the turkeys one day. You see the deer going by, and wish they weren't. Another sort of favorite spot, like I said, I make a lot of my own stuff, and we call it the Easy on the Geezer weeder wagon. And it's basically, if anybody's driven by, may have seen me laying down above the garden, and it's basically a 42-inch wheelbase platform, steel platform on wheels, and you lay on it. Deb made a wonderful cushion for it, and get a little sun umbrella goes on there, and you can just wheel yourself. The wheelbase is 42, all the beds are 42 inches, so it fits anywhere, except the potatoes are closer, but oh well. We don't need to do this on the potatoes. So if you have thinning of beets or carrots, everybody knows if you've gardened, you know how tedious that can be. If you have something like that, you just plop yourself down, or if your back gets sore, and I'm at that point. So you just lay on there, and your face is this far from the dirt. It's got a little cradle, actually, for your forehead. And so you're only, oh yeah, we're getting it. I gotta add a few more things to it. Cup holders going on this year. But anyways, so you're about 12 inches from the soil. And I was amazed, I started using it 2 summers ago. I was amazed at the biology in the soil I never knew was there. And you read about it, you know, and you dig and you see an earthworm or whatever. And you put your foot 12 inches there and keep it there for an hour, and you see all kinds of stuff. And these little teeny spiders and little bugs, and some good, some bad, all kinds of things. That's really, I like doing that, actually. It's pretty interesting.
Are you putting beverage holders underneath?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's in the plans, although it's under this much snow right now, so I didn't quite get it into the shop before it started snowing.
So, okay,
Oh, well.
on that note, just kind of hang on to your questions. We're going to go to our second guest tonight, and that's Luann Griswold from Velvet Pastures Farm on Wednesday Hill Road. And as I indicated earlier, she and Jim are partners in that farm, along with their daughters and their dog. And they do quite a bit of work down there. You need to know that, as is the case with virtually all these farms, these folks have extensive educational backgrounds and even other careers. And Luann is a professor at the University of New Hampshire in occupational therapy. Her husband, Jim, is a hydrogeologist as his principal career. And Luann's going to talk about Velvet Pastures, and we have some slides, and we think we have some audio.
Maybe.
So,
We'll
Luann?
see. All right. So welcome to 15 Minutes on Velvet Pastures Elk Ranch. If you live nearby and have your windows open between late August, early September, all the way into December, you will hear that sound. Day and night, especially at night. They tend to kind of quiet down from about 8 in the morning until noon. That must, you know, that's, I guess, when they're sleeping. And then they're back up, out again and bugling away. So it's a male thing only, and they do that to sort of establish dominance and let the other bull know that that herd belongs to them. But then there are 2 of them going back and forth. So my husband Jim and I moved to the farm just a few days before Christmas in 1999 with our 2 daughters, Kira and Maya. And the elk arrived in January of 2000, just a few weeks after we had been there. We started with 6 pregnant cows and a borrowed bull. The man that we bought our cows from said, well, you can't have an elk farm without a bull. So he said, I'm going to just give you a bull, so you have a bull on the property, which was great. And many of you know that we do always have at least 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 English Mastiffs. This is our current dog. He's a solo dog, and he's always happy to greet people with a big drool. Some of you have been to the farm and you know about the drool. So this series is called the Backyard Initiative, and this is the view that I get from my back deck of my backyard when I sit out there. And what I'm going to talk to you tonight is about why and how we got into elk farming and what we're doing to sustain it as a farm. So as Paul said, Jim is a hydrogeologist, and he loved his job. He was out playing in the dirt, doing lots of field trips and that kind of thing, and he did his job well. So his reward was they promoted him, right? So they gave him a desk, a computer, a telephone, and he was no longer playing in the dirt. And so one morning he was getting frustrated, and one morning the radio went on to National Public Radio, and all of a sudden he woke up with a start and said, "Listen, listen." And it was a talk show about a guy in Colorado who was sort of frustrated like he was and got into elk farming. And he said, "That's it, that's what I want to do." It's like, oh my gosh, I don't let him listen to NPR anymore. So I said, okay, you have to do your homework. You need to figure out if this is a reality. Can we really pull this off? Because it's a huge step to take on a farm. We were not farm people. We never grew up with farms at all, neither one of us. We didn't know how to drive tractors. Thank God for Eric and all the other farmers around in town who would rescue and teach us what to do. But he did figure out that it was a viable choice for us, and we wanted to stay in the school district. And I said, we need to find a farm in this area. And we were fortunate enough to find the farm on Wednesday Hill. At that point, the money was to be made from velvet antler. We harvest or cut off the antler when it's in its growing stage. And let's see, this guy, you can kind of see his antler kind of fuzzy looking. That's an indication that they're in velvet. And the velvet itself isn't important. That actually gets stripped off, but it's just that velvet stage of growth that lets everybody know that it's a living tissue. At that point, we would pool our antler. We would cut off the antler and we'd pool it with other elk farmers, and it would all get shipped to Korea. So now we dry it. We have it freeze-dried, ground up, and put into capsules for medicinal purposes here in the U.S. We harvested antler twice. So, we bought this farm, got these animals, started this process, harvested antler twice, 2 years, and chronic wasting disease hit western part of the U.S. and Canada. And Korea said, we're not going to buy any more antler from North America. Doesn't matter what part of North America, we're not going to take any. So it's like, uh-oh, now what do we do? That was our game plan. So we did figure out a way to have this velvet antler processed and preserved and used for medicinal purposes here. It's a natural source of glycosamine and chondroitin, which is used for arthritis. So we do sell it. A lot of athletes take velvet antler to help increase their overall stamina and their muscle strength. And it's one of those controversial subjects that'll kind of hit the news every so often, whether it's legal or not legal. So we've continued on a little bit with the antler, but with the decline in the antler sales, we really needed to shift our focus, and we shifted to meat. And then we've also had to think about how we would diversify the farm in other areas. So we let the animals keep their antler, and they lose them right around St. Patrick's Day, so that's coming up. It's not unusual for them to lose one antler first and hold on to the other one for a day or two, and then they'll kind of be a little crooked for a while when they're running around. Here's another angle of him with one antler kind of looking very funny. We sell some of the racks whole. Some people will buy them for wall decorations or lawn decorations and that kind of thing. And Jim also cuts them up for dog chews, and we sell those for dog chews. So immediately after they drop or shed their rack, they start growing a new set. And you can see right here there are little buttons growing. They're just little buds. And as soon as they fall, we start counting. We noted on the calendar if we were going to harvest it for velvet purposes. We would count and keep track, and at day 70 is when we want to harvest, because it's when it's kind of is at its largest stage of growth without calcifying and still has all the medicinal value to it. Otherwise, we just let them keep their antler and do what elk do. And this is what they do in the fall. Like I'm in your way. So at that point in the year, again, this is always between end of August, beginning of September through December, they can be super dangerous, and they're very, very much attuned to male beings. Jim can't even get close to the fence. They know he's a male. I can go up and the bulls don't do anything. One of them comes over and he'll eat out of my hand. With Jim, oh, no way, because they know that he's a male, and you know he might want one of those cows. I don't know. So the rest of the time, the rest of the year, they're very calm. They're very curious animals. We can always tell if somebody stopped along the road to look at the elk, because all the elk are looking, and they'll kind of walk down towards the fence. But if a person gets too close, then they turn skittish and they run. Some of them, 2 of them, have figured out that if they eat out of our hands, eat an apple out of our hands or a carrot, they get a name and they're guaranteed a very long life. We have 2 animals that we will bury on the property. We will never send them to meat. So that's all they have to do, eat out of our hand once and they're good. So we put in a small store in the front of the barn where we sell the meat, we sell the antler racks, and we sell some of the velvet elk capsules as well. And then we also sell our products at the Seacoast Eat Local Winter Farmers Market in Rollinsford. Care of the animals is, I have to click over here. Care of the animals is really pretty easy. That's one of the reasons I said he could do elk. I don't know who else in the audience, but I know some of you, so I said, sorry Eric, no cows, no chickens, no pigs, because I knew all those animals would take daily, twice a day, multiple times a day care. And we both had regular day jobs, we had kids. I just said, I can't do all that stuff. These guys do not take much effort at all. We feed them the big round bales of hay throughout the winter. And in the rest of the year, they just eat the grass in the pasture. We just need to make sure that they have water. We have a stream in one of our pastures and intermittent streams throughout other pastures, and we'll just keep a big bucket of fresh water out there for them. So they don't take much care. We need to monitor the fences, especially this year. Suddenly our 8-foot-high fence is only about 5 feet high right now. And we occasionally have to go out and cut trees that have fallen onto the fence. But other than that, they're pretty easy animals. We are trying to diversify the farm a bit because we do want to make sure that it is viable. Elk is not going to sustain us by itself. And we decided we wanted to grow something that other people weren't raising and weren't growing. And we sort of discovered Asian pears. They grow really well in this climate. We don't have to spray them. They don't get hit by disease or bugs or that kind of thing. So they're, again, a relatively easy crop for us to use. They're very large, sweet, crisp pears, and they're good. They're good storage fruit as well, similar to apples. So we can keep them. Actually, I still have a few left in the refrigerator from this last summer. So they keep really well. We also have some heirloom apple trees in the backyard. Now, these are heirloom, so they do get buggy. And we don't want to use pesticides, so they're always gnarly and yucky. So Jim makes them into hard cider for our own consumption. A couple of years ago, he decided that he would test my patience and try chickens. So again, I didn't want anything that was long-term, so I agreed to meat birds. So he built a chicken tractor, and we put it behind one of the fences in one of the pastures, and the elk have to be out of that pasture because the elk would just destroy this and probably attack the birds because they don't share very well. Elk aren't sharing animals. And we go out every morning and we just move the tractor one space. And so the chickens always get fresh green grass and fresh bugs along with the grain and water that we give them. And we did them for meat. So they were around for 8 to 10 weeks depending on the variety that we had. And again, we just did this for ourselves. I think someday we may end up selling some chicken meat. It's been pretty easy. The dog loves them. He cannot wait. I'll say, okay, we got to go check the chickens, and he's right there. Yeah, let's go check those chickens. And the chickens are pretty patient with him too. So farming for us has been very rewarding. We don't measure our success just by money alone. It's really enriched our lives. It's brought us closer to a sense of community, especially in this community where agriculture is valued. It's gave us good connections in other parts of our lives, and it's been great for our kids to grow up on a farm. They learned hard work and learned that sense of how you help everybody out. One year, one of the bulls tossed another bull over the fence. That was a little scary, and we had a bull out, and Tina had driven down the road, and she called Eric and this whole chain of people, and suddenly Eric is at our doorstep, and he said, I'm here. So he was out there, and we're all shoveling gates, another one of those big snowstorms, shoveling gates, open, trying to get the bull back in, who wanted to come in. And my daughter wrote her college essay on how neighbors came to help, and we would have helped in other situations as well. It's just what you do. And so, I don't think we would have gotten that had we stayed in the suburbs in another town. It's not the same as giving somebody a cup of sugar when you need it. It's just that appreciation for hard work and doing what we need to do, and appreciating the animals and the connections that animals help us make. What we have done to try to preserve our land is to put it into conservation easement. We did a grasslands protection grant, and so the only stipulation for us is that we mow it once a year to make sure that the trees don't grow. We can't put it into row crops, but we could put it into any kind of a grass crop. So it's fine in pasture, it's fine as hay. We could do wheat, but we can't do corn. Corn is a row crop. But it means that we will never grow, we and nobody else will ever grow houses on that land either, so it'll always be preserved as an open space. And our goal is to really continue to diversify the farm as much as we can and be able to make a go of it. Jim recently, Paul may not even know this, decided he was not going to be a full-time hydrogeologist and a part-time farmer. He went part-time with his day job and is going to be a full-time farmer and a part-time geologist. And so we're trying to make that transition, and his goal is to make the farm a financial success as well as a heart success. So thank you for the opportunity to share our little story with you. I'll take questions. I'm sure everybody's not going to just go put up 8-foot fencing to try elk in their backyard, but try pears, try other fruit, try chickens. They were easy. I did it a second year. We're going to do it a third year. And remember, I was the one who said no chickens. So, yes.
Of course, elk are wild animals.
They are.
How hard are they to manage when you want to harvest antlers or process for meat these animals?
Great question. We don't ever rush at them because they're wild animals. And I hate to use the word wild because they're not going to, wild means that they're going to, be ready to attack at any moment, and they're not. But I call them wild animals too. But we usually get a group of people together to help us herd the animals when we want to bring them in. A few people here have been part of that herding process. And we just go out in the field and we kind of form a human chain across the field, and we raise our arms up so that we look bigger than they are. And we just slowly walk, and we watch them. And Jim and I know what we're kind of looking for. What we don't want them to do is turn around and bolt and come back through, because then we have to start again, and then they're that much wiser, and we don't want them to take the lead. We want to take the lead. And we just slowly pressure them to go into the gates and then into the handling area that's on the outside of our barn. In general, they know what to do. The young calves are the ones who don't have a clue what's going on. They're the ones that we always worry about because they get scared, they're nervous, they don't know why there are people in their space and why the other cows are moving fast. But the older cows, they know what to do. It's like, oh, here they come. Okay, we'll just wander through. And because we don't do anything to them to hurt them. We use a topical wormer to make sure that they don't get parasites in their gut, and we give them a rabies vaccine. That's the only thing we give them. And then to send them off to meet, we just keep them in the handling area and however many we're keeping, and back the truck up and reverse the gates, and they jump right onto the truck. They don't even know it's hit them. Mm-hmm.
Do you process the velvet capsules at the farm? Do you make them there?
No, we don't. We send them up to a place in northern Maine, and he has a big freeze dehydrator, and he does the capsules. He grinds them up and brings them back with sealed jars, cotton balls, and everything. Excuse me. Mm-hmm.
How many acres do you have of pasture? Is it just one pasture, multiple pastures? And have you figured out how many animals per acre seems to work well?
We have 4 pastures. They're all in different sizes. I would say we have 56 acres total. We probably have maybe 12 acres in pasture. I'm looking at Eric, who probably is a better judge than I am. Jim would know that answer. Huh? 15? Okay. And it takes about 3/4 of an acre per animal in general. We do rotationally graze them, so we monitor how the grass is looking and make sure that we keep them in one spot if it's a small spot for 2 weeks, then move them to another spot, and another spot that's bigger for 3 or 4 weeks, and we just kind of keep rotating them around. Mm-hmm.
The hay that you feed them, is that produced at the farm?
Mm-hmm. It's cut off the backfield.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to find someone special to process them, or do you? Where do they go?
We send our animals to Wyndham Butcher up in Wyndham, Maine. We just like the work that they do, and so once we found somebody. Not everybody will do game meat.
Right.
Right, so not everybody will. And not everybody, people who will do it are not all experienced at doing game meat either.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really great to work with us, and we tell him what we want, and he'll, so we do that. We do have that. It'd be nice if we had a mobile slaughter, and they're working on that in Concord. So any farmer, you got to help get that bill passed. So
We have about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll just open it up to general questions. And again, we have Luann and Deb and Steve. So if you have general questions you'd like to ask, now is the time to do it. We're looking at 2 different economic models for farms tonight. And so you may have questions about that, or you may have other questions. So it's all yours.
Yeah, and also, I think that's experimented with some grapes and some other.
Oh, yes. We tried grapes. The birds love us for having grapes. We have not had any success for ourselves, and they're kind of shaded, so we're going to actually pull those and we're going to put it into blackberries. And again, our model is that we're trying to do things that other people don't do. There are a lot of people who have blueberries and apples, so we're not trying to do blueberries and apples. I mean, we have blueberries, but we eat them ourselves and give them to our neighbors. But we don't think Lee needs another blueberry farm. We think Lee needs an Asian pear farm and a blackberry farm. So we're trying to just do other things to make it more viable.
Question for, go ahead.
Just a silly question. How does Jim's hard cider turn out?
It's good.
Good.
It's good. Yeah, no, it's sort of similar to, Strongbow or something like that from England. Not what you would, it's not the bathtub cider. It's good.
question for Steve and Deb in terms of what your work day typically looks like in season and your work week. How many hours are we talking about? How do you handle that? How much do you work?
A lot. All the time. Starting, well, I mean, it starts ramping up on the 1st of April. I mean, there's stuff to do starting, we'll be starting seeds at the end of this week coming up. But once we get into April, it depends a little on the weather to getting ramped up. But once we're into May, it's, up at 5 and outside as soon as possible, really. I mean, 6 o'clock, 6:30 we're outside, and the day is over when it's over, I guess. We try to get a little time. I mean, that really includes Sunday. We might get going a little bit slower on Sunday morning, but there's always stuff to do. We try to go to Prescott Park every chance we get. It just gets us out, hear a little music. It's a few hours, and and that's about it. And we do not do any winter growing. I mean, we talked a lot about this in the last couple of years. We need to regenerate. We're not that young. We don't want to be out and shoveling out a hoop house, over the last month. So we don't do any winter growing. So we have an extension on our CSA, so it really goes until about, do a little add-on of 4 or 5 weeks. We go to about Thanksgiving, sell a few Christmas trees, and then we're done, basically, until 1st of April, as far as being outside every day, all day. So it gives us a little chance to, recuperate, I guess.
The weather also dictates what we do. If it's raining, we're forced inside, we're in the barn, so there's always something that keeps us going. I tend to do my work when it's not a very nice day, or if it's too hot to be out in the garden, then I'll do my work.
I have a whole lot of respect for your ability to do all this and your ability to kind of improvise where you need to improvise to make things, to figure out a solution on the spot. You're at the university, so you're teaching pretty much full-time, year-round, occupational therapy. What's it like going back and forth between that environment and the farm?
It's a different world. It's a very different world. And going back to the farm is, a nice sigh. And then I go to work and I just get into work mode. I mean, they're just totally different. But it's funny because people will see me at farmer's market and they kind of do it from work and they'll do a double take. What are you doing here? Oh, this is my farm. And so, but that university connection has been fun. We have an animal behavior class that comes out every year. They bring their labs out and they observe animal behavior using different methods. So it gives the kids a chance to learn how to track different types of data. We've had a couple of UNH students do their senior honors theses on the farm, again looking at elk behavior. And that's been fun.
So how smart are elk?
Oh, they're very smart. They're very social. And I guess I equate social and intelligence. I know it's not quite the same, but they're very social animals. They have their own system of communicating with one another, different sounds that they make. The old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer games, they play all those games. I mean, they will play, we'll see them play chase with one another, and it's almost like one will hit the other one's rear end and then the other one will turn and chase them, and they do communal childcare. One cow will be responsible for watching all the calves, and the other cows will all go off and graze, and then somebody comes back and relieves her. So I take that all as signs of intelligence.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot what I was going to ask.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's the reindeer games that threw you.
I know what it was. Because they're such big animals, is there a problem with predators?
Not really. We've had one coyote get in during calving season. Never made it out. Yeah, those cows know what to do.
I was just wondering about visiting hours for both farms.
Anytime you can catch us, or send an email, arrange a time to come over. But we're there, I mean, like I said, once we can get outside, they're pretty much all the time except for market days. And that's Monday and Thursday for us. I mean, we're there all morning, but those aren't good days though. We're busy, really busy. But anytime,
Always
yeah.
have an extra hoe for them when they come.
We have extras.
I'm a good hoer.
Almost all our cultivation is by hand. So, yeah, there's a lot of hoeing. There are tricks to it.
Yeah, you're
You
the
just need right-
labor-intensive
you just
farm.
need the right-
I'm the
Yeah,
easy
there's no
farm.
room for equipment to get into the beds in the way that we do it. So we use some sort of specialized hose. Anybody who gets a Johnny Selected Seed catalog, all those really expensive hose that they have on their tool page, are all the ones I've ever bought are well worth the money. And you can really tear down a row of intensively planted lettuce plants in no time with what they call a collinear hoe, which is basically a flat blade with the pole coming right up the middle of it. You stand like this and you just do this, and the blade goes under the surface of the weeds, cuts the weeds off. And you can really fly with the thing. So you just need the right tools, really. Anything that can save you time like that is well worth it. But yeah, we have extras. Stop by.
So what about Velvet Pastures?
We usually recommend that people call ahead. We're typically there on the weekends, but sometimes, life happens and we're not there. So if you call and we happen to know that we're gonna be tossing some apples or pears or some broccoli or whatever out to the animals, we'll wait and do that when people come, so they're more likely to kind of come up to the fence.
Any other questions? So, I want to thank our guests tonight, Velvet Pastures, Luann and Jim.
Yeah. Jim.
Griswold, and Deb Fisher and Steve Handler from Mildred's Drumlin Farm. And I want to thank the library and the Ag Commission for sponsoring. I forgot to mention that those books on the table there are from our library. And so if you want to take a look at that collection before you leave, that would probably be a nice thing. We have a really nice collection about farming and about sustainability at our facility. And so we leave each other on this cold night, maybe one of the coldest nights of the winter. And the last time we left, we had a lot of snow, but the forecast looks pretty good, and we're probably beyond the worst of it all. And we're probably all closed in, a little bit of cabin fever happening. But you made it out here, and if it gets really, really close at home, just play some elk bugling, and that'll kind of relieve the tension. So, listen, thanks for coming out. There's some refreshments over there, and thank you very much.